Hello and welcome to Convix, where we are celebrating experiment-driven marketing. The exclusive online event is brought to you by VWO, where we help you fix your conversion leaks and help you make most out of your traffic. I'm Anirudh and I manage paid and organic growth at VWO. Today, with us we have Chase Richards, who's the head of monetization at Avast. I'm excited to have you with us, Chase.
Thanks very much. It's good to be here.
Same here. I'm sure with our session, our visitors will have a lot to learn from our discussion, and we'll get to learn a lot from your experience running experiments at Avast. And without further ado, I think we can dive right into the questions. So first of all, I would love to know from you, Chase, a little bit about your role at Avast. What do you do? What is your day looks like at Avast?
Okay, sure. So I look after consumer sales and renewals for the CCleaner family of products. CCleaner was acquired by Avast about 2.5 years ago, I think. So it's mostly CCleaner for PC, but there's a few other bits and pieces, a mobile version, a Mac version. That means it's my job to make sure that all of our sales and retention channels are constantly improving, not just on the website, but in the products themselves, and also any messaging and communication channels that we have. I've got quite a varied and broad role here because I'm one of the people who's been here for many, many years and learned how lots and lots of different parts of the business work. But I was originally brought on to improve the website's performance. It quickly became clear though that the conversion journey was much more than just the website. It was all about the products and all the different touch points. The most important of which is definitely the product itself. So the role has kind of grown to encompass everything that we do with all of our customer touchpoints. I also act as a kind of a product owner or a scrum master for our web development team. So I create user stories and prioritize the backlog and kind of guide improvements on the website or new features from design through to implementation. And then I also have a few other hats that I have to wear. So as the sort of de facto leader of digital marketing here, I plan the implementation of campaigns across all of our channels. And I also provide sales forecasting and reporting up to the C-levels.
Awesome. That sounds quite a handful. So I'm sure you have a big team to manage all of that. How's your team structured? How do you take care of so many different activities and tasks all together?
Well, that's quite funny. Right now, we do have quite a large marketing team. We've grown to the size of 7 people, which is much bigger than we've ever been. For the last 3 years, it's mostly been myself, one other person who handled the kind of more PR and comms side of marketing, and then we had an analyst. And then we've had various designers and developers along the edges, but that was the sort of core marketing team. And in fact, when Avast acquired us and they came into the office, they sort of knew how many people we were, but they were like, well, where is everybody else? Where's the person who handles your social? Where's the person who handles your SEO? And I was like, yeah. So we've learned to have lots of different hats, but finally we've been able to expand our department a bit more, get some people with more specialist experience in various areas, so we can be more productive in core areas like SEO, where previously we've had to just kind of quickly put on the SEO hat and figure out a problem.
And then that sounds quite a lean team. So what has been your biggest channel of getting new traffic, and where do you see your most new business coming from?
Well, actually, most of the new business comes via the app. I'll talk about it a little bit more, but the model is quite simple, where you have a good free product that works well and does one thing well, and then it spreads via word of mouth. And for the last 10, 15 years or so, most of our top of the funnel acquisition was via word of mouth. There was almost nothing spent on acquisition. We've still barely ever spent any money on PPC. It just kind of all walks through the front door. Obviously, with a very mature product, that will tend to plateau and slow down over time. So you have to kind of keep putting energy and effort into it. But it's all very much organic growth, word of mouth, referrals from major download portals and other websites and things like that.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, I remember my first experience with Avast, and it was because a friend of mine suggested me to try Avast. So that really rings true to home, because that is something I've seen quite often happen with really good products, that the customers become your evangelists and so on and so forth. And that becomes your biggest driver of growth. And great to see that happening, because Avast is one of the companies that produces really great products. And it's great to be speaking to somebody who manages growth at Avast. So speaking of that, like you mentioned, a lot of the new business comes from word of mouth, and then they sort of figure out, maybe they try out the product and then they decide to buy it, and somewhere down the line in the journey. So what does conversion really mean at Avast when you're trying to optimize or run new experiments for your visitors?
So conversion can mean one of two things. We're usually talking about conversion from a free user to a paying user, and the model looks quite similar across most of our products. As I mentioned, you give them a free product, and then they eventually come and buy something else, which is one of the reasons they wanted to acquire the business. So in general, we want to turn as many free users into customers who see the value of our added premium benefits, and then they go on to stay with us for many years. Aside from the headline revenue number, the actual number of active customers we have is the most important metric to use, because that forms the pipeline for revenue renewals next year. So we're always trying to build on that, and try to get as many people, not just making that first step to give us their money, but making sure that they stay happy, stay engaged, stay using it, so that when we say next year, hey, we need a bit more money from you, they go, yeah, sure, not a problem. Here you go, happy to do it. But in order to turn free users into those kind of customers, you first have to get the free users. So the first step on the conversion journey is just download and use the free software. And that gives us a challenge, because if you make your free product really good and really easy to get, you're not going to get to sell a lot of upgrades. But if you make it too limited or annoying, like a 10-day free trial that you can't click most of the buttons, you won't really get new customer base. You'll just totally erode them. Likewise, if you hit them with sales campaigns and messaging too much, you eventually turn people off. So we've got to strike this really nice balance between converting new potential users at the top of the funnel into free users, and then guiding those users who might be interested in a more full-featured product towards the final conversion step. There's also a big segment of our user base who will never convert. We have to accept that. We exist to serve those users more than anyone else, really, because, as I said, they're our evangelists. But we do also monetize those users in different ways. We never really made any bones about this. We offer Google Chrome and other third-party applications through our installer. If you don't have Google Chrome, we might offer it to you, and we get paid a little bit of money that way. So the revenue model is actually quite complex. It's not just okay, how can we sell to this many users? It's a question of, all right, in this, where Google pays us X cents per Chrome install, does it make sense to do the hard sell on these guys? Should we maybe just say, here's the free product, don't worry about buying it, just install it? We might make more money that way. So a lot of our thinking about what a conversion is boils down to what's the best outcome we can get per user in a certain region or a segment.
Right. And so, like you mentioned, so there are two sets of users. One is people who have already installed Avast and they're using the product. And then there's a second set of users who are totally new users who don't have it installed. So where do you see more growth coming from? Do you see more growth coming from net new business, or do you see more growth coming from repeat purchases, or selling to people who have already been your users or visitors?
So actually, a lot of our business increasingly is coming from customers staying with us and renewing their licenses. We didn't really have that much of that before, but we've put a lot of changes in place, and retention is becoming a bigger part of our business, which tends to happen as your business matures, and if you've got a subscription base that keeps coming back to you, and a mature product, that's going to happen, and more of your revenue is going to come from retention and renewals. But we are doing a lot of acquisition at the moment. We have been doing very well, but the top of the funnel has been slowing down, and that's kind of a necessary impact of the nature of the PC market. We sell software for desktop PCs, and everybody knows that segment is declining.
So I think that's one of the beasts that all the growing businesses face. At one point, they reach this stagnancy where it's difficult to get net new growth because of competition and market dynamics. But then the majority of the chunk which comes in, it comes through repeat users or repeat customers, and that is where a lot of the marketing strength and marketing effort actually goes into. So with that, I would love to touch upon when and why did Avast feel the need to actually run experiments, and where does most of your experiments actually are run into? Is it mostly on new users or mostly on repeat purchases? And how do you decide what experiments to run?
The decision to run experiments predates Avast, actually, when CCleaner was still a little private company. The co-founders had built the company up to around 20 employees, which was serving the needs of about 80 million free users, and probably about 50 or 60,000 customers. We didn't really know how many it was back then because we didn't really have the data. A lot of things weren't built with data accuracy in mind, or tracking. The stuff was built by developers, not marketers or analysts. So then they realized at some point that the website was really not performing well, and it wasn't driving sales, and the product itself wasn't driving sales, but you couldn't fiddle with that because it's a big, bulky desktop application. So let's look at the website. And the conversion rates from free users to pay users was sitting at around 0.1%, which is very low, even with such big volumes. So the install rates, even by then, seemed to be plateauing, and there was very little growth. There wasn't growth in the top of the funnel. The website performance had plateaued, and they just weren't reaching all of the customers they thought that they could potentially convert. So they brought me and the other general marketer on board, and we had a sort of a dual mandate, which was do what we can to convert more free users, and then don't piss off the free users, because as I said, they're our bread and butter. We monetize them in lots of ways. They're our evangelists. And we've been trying to do that for the last 3 years, really, and we've made a lot of progress, but we're still struggling with that really basic paradox where if we try to sell too hard, we're going to cut off the top of the funnel.
Wow! And did you really say 18 million visitors of users?
Yeah. 80 million active users we estimate at the time. It's more like 103 million now, I think.
Wow! So just let's stop and let me grasp that number for a second, because I think a lot of businesses would love to be in your position, and having that kind of growth without any active marketing and with so few employees is very, very rare to see in today's world, and that just goes on to show how great of a product they were out to build.
Yeah.
So that's definitely there, and yeah.
We love to brag that CClean has been downloaded 2.5 billion times, and that's not an exaggeration. It is a little bit of an estimate because it's based on our best guesses around various data points, but we think that that's about it. And further, on the Google Chrome distribution, we have estimated that around 8% of all Google Chrome installs worldwide are from us. So yeah, we've got big volume, big numbers, but frustratingly difficult to get them to cross that line and convert.
Absolutely, and with that kind of number, it's very hard to show net new growth, and even like 0.001% of growth also really means like some really good conversions which are happening. It can actually increase our top line by quite a bit. If you look at the revenue numbers, just 0.1%, 0.01% is also significant numbers if you look at that kind of user base. So that's huge
and
numbers.
That's why segmenting and targeting and personalization are becoming much more important, because we can fiddle things and move levers around, and your net effect is usually zero of everything we do. But if we isolate a specific group of customers or users that might respond better to a different treatment, that can somehow suddenly make a difference.
So with all these users coming in, what are the different kinds of qualitative and quantitative data that you look at, or the analysis that you do to understand these various user behaviors, to understand the various user motivations? What are the kind of different analysis that you do on all these users? Because I'm sure it's a handful of analysis to do.
Yeah. Actually, one of the first things they said to me, and they started asking me all sorts of hard data questions when I first came on here, and I fancied myself fairly good with GA and a couple of pivot tables, but I very quickly said to them, you guys need a data analyst, and I know just the person. And I brought along one of my colleagues from a previous workplace, and between the two of us, or mostly her, we built up the beginnings of a big data architecture. And then that was expanded more and more with access to Avast systems and their data cubes. So now what we do is we use a combination of Google Analytics and then a lot of custom data collection and processing that feeds into a cube. an Azure cube, and we analyze this using mostly Microsoft Power BI, but also just various Excel sheets that we've got together. It collects data from Google Analytics about site traffic, but it also puts us together with all of our e-commerce data, platform data from our licensing server, and the product itself. And that's been a big project, about 3 years in the making, and it's always ongoing. But what that's given us now is that we've got all of our different funnels plotted out in GA or in Power BI. So I can look at those on a daily basis and see if something's dropped, something's gone up. And that's usually when I'll figure out, okay, something's broken, or something's working better than expected, or some traffic is going here when we thought they were going there. So I'll spend a lot of my time chasing those kind of things down. And one thing we found is that fixing broken things often leads to a better ROI than trying to come up with new ideas or getting new stuff developed. So another thing is that because our users come to our site once a month to get the latest version, one of the interesting things that we look at a lot is how many times people come to our site before they end up purchasing. We've actually set a cookie. We've got a custom cookie set that counts every time someone comes to our website, and we've noticed that on your first visit and your second visit and your third visit, you're either just going to download the free version or kind of give up or not get it for whatever reason. But once it gets to the fifth, the sixth, the seventh time you come, people start becoming much more likely to purchase. Aside from all that sort of hard data analysis that we do, we also make a lot of use of surveys. At certain strategic points to find out why users choose to do something or not do something. And we found this data to be really valuable. We had a lot of assumptions about who our users were, about what motivated them, about how long it took them to purchase. The received tribal wisdom from the owners who set up the company was that this is a techie product. People, the guy who built it was a developer. He gave it to his developer friends to kind of clear out their cache, which made it easier to do development projects. And when we started doing surveys, we realized that it couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, we did have a core of techie users, but most of our users were mom and pops at home whose son had installed this thing on the computer because they complained it was running slow. And then every time they say it's slow, he just goes and runs it for them, and it speeds it up a bit. And our user base was made up of vastly different kinds of people than we'd ever thought. And in fact, the people who are buying from us are not the techie people, because they use CCleaner to do a very specific job that it does very well. Whereas the non-techie people have sort of broader uses for the thing, and they wanted to do things more automatically for them. So that's where we're going to go after. After this, we've kind of used heat maps and click maps a bit in the past. But the thing that we found is that when your website is basically a big free download button, that free download button just gets lit up like a Christmas tree, and everything else has a few dots in it. So it doesn't really tell us a lot, except that people like free things.
Yeah. So I 100% echo your thoughts, and the point which you mentioned about surveys, I think that's bang on. A lot of people, especially within marketing, have some preconceived notions that our users are from a certain geography, or they're from a certain a customer type, whether they're enterprise or they're mid-market or they're SMBs, and whether they're buying it as for a certain kind of feature or something or the other sort, right? So that's always something that's very good to confirm by hard data. And that's where surveys is actually really, really helpful. And that's one of the things which we also found out, that a lot of the users, when they were buying VWO, a lot of times we go with a preconceived notion that most of them are product managers or most of them are just marketers. But with our survey, we actually found out that a lot of these people were user experience designers, which was a new revelation for us. And that actually helped us mold our internal marketing efforts to a great extent. So definitely hear about that. And I also went through the Avast website, and I found out that the website is very minimal. It's very focused on just one conversion action, which is to download it or buy it. So it's very straightforward. There's no BS around why we are great or why we are not, and it's just simple, straightforward. So that's something that I really loved about the website. And I'm sure it really helps boost the conversion rate, because people are coming for just one single reason to either download it or to upgrade it, and that's what they're going to get. And especially with the non-techie people, it becomes really, really impactful that you take them directly to the homepage and to just one single action and help them do that action as soon as possible. So that's definitely something that we also learn. So great to hear about your insights. I would also love to touch upon your point of the data analyst. And that's, I think, one of the skills which is very underrated in marketing today, because with so much data that is being generated with hundreds of tools that we marketers use, I think that's one of the most important things, or one of the most important team members that we need in our modern marketing teams today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've always been big on data, and Avast is obviously much bigger on data. Just like many of the other large tech companies of today, data is their strength, and Avast wouldn't be able to, be the quickest at fighting various virus threats and things like that if it didn't have millions and millions of data points coming in real time. That data is used so extensively, and without giving away any trade secrets, there is literally a room full of people watching viruses happening in real time going, there's one, get it. So that's really important, and the data collection is really, really vital to this whole company.
Absolutely, absolutely. So like we spoke about how let's say all these users that are coming onto the website, you figure out what are their motivations. You ask certain questions to them, and you also figure out whether spending more time on the website. You figure out how are the heat maps showing up. All these things. So how do you then decide? Okay, what would be my CRO priorities? Let's say if you were planning out, let's say 2 weeks or two, let's say months ahead, you have a certain goal, you have a certain conversion rate that you're tracking, and you want to improve on that. So how do you figure out your CRO priorities in that sense? Like how do you suggest that, okay, let's try out the headline first, or we should try out this, changing this image first, or we should try out this CTA text first? Or so how do you figure that out?
Okay, so we tend to look at everything through the lens of a kind of impact versus effort analysis. We're obviously a small team, and there's lots and lots of things that we can always do. You've got guys from corporate headquarters saying, "Hey, you should move this button around," and you got someone else saying, like, well, "When can we get this up on the website? I want to redesign the blog." And there's also lots of quick wins that you can chase after all the time to get an extra couple of quarter of % here or there. But it's very easy to kind of get stuck in this thing where you're trying to go after everything all the time. So we look at it through the lens of essentialism as well, and go, well, is this the most important thing we could be working on? And every now and again, we have to periodically review what's on the backlog, and the backlog grows, and the backlog grows, and we've got a design backlog, and a marketing backlog, and a web dev backlog. And we actually did this exercise recently, last week, where we went through a web development backlog of about 120 items, some of them that have been sitting there for over 2 years. And we just went like, has anyone asked about these things? No. And we just deleted the whole backlog. And everyone went, well, you can't do that. You can't delete the backlog. And I said, well, what's going to happen? And they said, well, these things aren't going to get done. And I said, great. You don't have to do everything. And so we spend a lot of time, because we have all this data, we can look at things and we can sort of very quickly go, yeah, that's lots of traffic, but it's sort of not really that much money. So it goes sort of over there on the board. And then you say, well, that's not a lot of traffic, but these people spend a lot of money. So it goes over there on the board. And you can very quickly say, all right, well, that's going to take us 3 months, but it's worth loads of money. That's going to take us 3 months, but it's worth nothing. That we can do this week, and it's worth more than all of them. So we're going to do that thing. So yeah, that's pretty much how we would do it. We always try to weigh every single thing up against the questions of how much is this worth, or how valuable is this to our users compared to the other things that we're doing? And then, is this the most important thing we could be working on right now?
So when you're trying to figure out whether this thing is going to be important to the end conversion goal or not, what are the various things that you keep in mind? Is it the effort, or how? Because before you run the experiment, it's very difficult to understand what will be the end outcome of that experiment. So how do you then prioritize? Okay, let me do this thing first because I think this is important to do.
Yeah, well, I kind of have a hierarchy of how frustrating or difficult something is going to be to implement. So there's some tests that we as a marketing department with some basic HTML knowledge can deploy with VWO without breaking anything. Those ones are the easiest. Then there's going to be something that I'm going to need one of the developers to write something for me to deploy it before I can test it. That's more time. Then if I need a designer to first do me some graphics or some assets, that's even more time. And then if I need to do anything to do with our product or our licensing system, that's in the future, because we've got one guy who deals with the licensing system, and the product team is always working really hard on they've got a 3-month 3-month roadmap that they already know. So if you want something in there, something else has to go out. So it's usually that question of which teams are going to be involved. Like, can we do this now by hacking something together in HTML? Great. Or do we need to get web devs, designers, backend infrastructure involved? And it kind of goes down the chain like that. So we try to identify those things that do need that more intensive work or architectural work to be done as quickly as we can, because they can really slow things down. And if you're waiting for something that needs a change to the license server, for example, you could be waiting for months.
Absolutely. So with all these experiments that you mentioned, that or probably the ideas that come up, so is there do you guys like work together to get ideas, or let's say anybody in the team can give ideas to anyone, or how do you collect all these ideas together?
So idea generation is a very organic process around here. We don't have any formal templates or anything, but because we all sit together in one office, we use Slack a lot. We constantly review all of the changes that we're doing to things, all of the new features that we're building, and these ideas kind of come up organically. We try to follow an agile principle of presenting things that you've got on the go or that you're building as often as possible. So especially when we've got new big product features or changes to the website or marketing campaigns, we try to make sure that everybody knows about the stuff all the time. And that's mostly just for keeping communication good in the office and making sure that projects don't surprise people. But it has a side effect where everybody is kind of aware of the state of the application, the email channel, the website, the in-product messaging, and all of that all the time. And so you start getting ideas coming out from QA testers and from the guys in the business sales team, and they say, hey, if on your consumer page you could be doing this. And these ideas sort of come up all over the place, and we just usually note them down in our kind of either our own spreadsheet or our notes, or we just keep them in a Slack channel together, and then go over them and prioritize them fairly regularly. So yeah, I think ideas tend to come from everybody knowing the product really well, knowing the website really well, and also caring a lot about it and seeing stuff that they want to improve, and looking at the feedback that our users give us. And we always share things like that. We encourage everyone to read through survey responses and things like that, because every now and again someone will pick something out and go, I wonder if other people are having this problem. So yeah, I have to say that ideas sort of come from everyone. And also a lot of the time we get inherited ideas or learnings from one of the other teams at Avast, and they might have a similar product or they've had a similar problem before. So we try to borrow some of their learnings and their insights as well when they might have done something that we haven't done yet.
Absolutely, and I would also mention one of the channels which we have seen has worked really well in helping us generate ideas is the customer support channel, and talking to the customer support guys, because a lot of times these users will come up to them and say that, hey, we were trying to look for XYZ and we were not able to find it, or where's your number, or things like that. So that really helps us figure out, okay, what are the users actually seeking for when they come onto the website. And that's why a lot of times we run these surveys on the website in order to ask them, okay, did you find what you were looking for? And how quickly did you find it? How would you rate your website experience? So all these things really help put things in perspective, whether we are able to serve the users effectively or not. So that really helps us a lot in that fashion.
Yeah, and we actually have a tradition here that when you start, it doesn't matter sort of what level you start at. And in fact, we just had a new general manager who had to do it as well. You spend the first 3 or 4 days doing a couple of hours of customer support a day, answering tickets on Zendesk and just getting to know what frustrations and problems and things that customers usually have. And it is amazing for getting new people on board to understand how the product works, because you got to know that in order to solve people's problems, and just what frustrations people have. What are the challenges that we're dealing with from the customer point of view, not what we say here is our problem, what our technical frustrations are. It's what are the customers dealing with.
I 100% echo your thoughts, because that's something that even VWO started off doing really well, because a lot of people really swear by the support that VWO has, and that's one of the reasons why we got there, because a lot of the people who used to join early on, especially the first 100 employees, they used to go through all the customer support tickets, in fact answer a lot of the customer support tickets themselves in order to learn what are the customer frustrations, even why they were buying VWO and what were the main problems with VWO. So all these things really help put things in context of really understanding the end user, which should be the end goal of all the businesses if you want to serve them well. So that's definitely one of the things that we have seen is really helpful. So with all these new ideas that you have, do you use any other tools to prioritize them? Like you mentioned, you use spreadsheet and Excels. Do you use anything else to record these observations? And because let's say observation can come from anybody, right? So let's say you might have, let's say somebody sees a screenshot of something broken somewhere and they might send you a screenshot on Slack. So how do you keep track of all these things to get your ideas together organized?
So we literally have a big Google spreadsheet that I set up 3 years ago and still going. And any ideas kind of get dumped in there. And then from there, they can turn from ideas to tests that are in progress to implementation. We also record when we implemented them and any noticeable uplift that we got in there. And that spreadsheet is now hundreds of lines long, and it's quite bulky, but it contains loads and loads of knowledge. And aside from that, Avast also has a big kind of like wiki style knowledge portal where people are always encouraged to share things that they've done. And it's really important to do that because there are lots of different business units working on different things. There's not only in the utilities business, there's CCleaner, but they also have AVG TuneUp and there's another one for Avast as well. And these products have very similar user bases, but they're quite different when you actually get to use them, and they've got very different value offerings. But they've quite often been through a lot of the same kind of journeys and the same challenges. And sometimes we find guys trying to figure something out that we've already solved, and we say, well, you should just try this. And it's really great to see when they say, oh, we did this test a year ago, and that they often put together slide decks and things like that. So we're trying to do that as well, when you can go, well, look, they tried this against this, and that worked the best. And so you don't have to do as much guesswork. So you're sharing knowledge around teams is really important, because with such a big organization, you can find 3 or 4 guys trying to do the same job at the same time without even knowing about it.
Agreed. So when you run these experiments, how many experiments do you run simultaneously?
That's tricky. So we mostly do 2 or 3 on the website itself, but there may be other tests running in in-app messages or emails. We just try not to make our lives difficult by running loads of tests at the same time. The main reason for this is that once a test is successful, you then got to go back to your developers and say, hey, can you implement this, please? And if we were just to do dozens of tests all the time, all we'd do is end up with a really big backlog. And often these things can kind of conflict with each other. You run test A and it says, all right, do this. And then 3 weeks later or a month later, you run another test. And you kind of forget that you said, all right, can you change this button to green? And then you got another test that says, can you remove this button? So we try to keep things tight and really limited to a small number of tests that are really good. But we do have lots of other lines of businesses as well, and lots of different channels that can be optimized. And we've got our e-commerce and our cart as well, which dynamic testing platforms don't play very well with it, because it's got all sorts of dynamic pricing and things like that, and chances are I'll break something. So they test things separately, and we have to kind of marry up these tests and collect all the data separately. And then we might also be testing within the app itself, but that's a little bit more cumbersome. It's a 15-year-old C++ application, and it's not nearly as flexible as testing on the website would be. Then other lines of business, like the business team, the guys who sell products to SMBs and that kind of thing, they are often running about 4 or 5 different personalization campaigns on the website at a time. But there's a very small audience, there's a few hundred people, because you're talking to a really specific type of customer who knows pretty much what they want and just needs to be taken to the right place.
Okay. And so with all these experiments, how do you keep track of all these experiments? What is running where, and what is the end outcome of certain experiments, and how do you plan out the next steps for that experiment? How do you track all of that?
So As I mentioned, we have that big Google spreadsheet that I keep track of everything in. We also use a Trello board. We've tried lots of different sort of product management, project management, roadmap management tools, and we realized that in our heads we kind of organize everything in a Kanban style according to little tickets. So we just went back to Trello, and we're really enjoying it. We've also hired a new CRO manager, finally, who has a much more rigorous approach to record keeping than I do. And he's built a nice visual way to see at a glance like what we've tested, what worked, what hasn't tested. So yeah, and then we try to keep a relatively short life cycle on these things. So if we come up with a test and we can do it ourselves, or run a test maybe within a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then it'll go into a 2-week dev sprint, and then we can get it deployed and out within a month. And that sounds like a fairly long time, but when you want to be really sure about stuff and you want to make sure things are built and developed quickly, then and QA'd properly, then that's usually how long it takes. Yeah. So we mostly will do conventional A/B tests, as I said, although sometimes our developers will build these for us. But for some of the more complex tests where we're looking for behavior across multiple regions, we might use personalization campaigns, and then we'll collate the data using our Cube or Google Analytics. I mentioned briefly that we've got an e-commerce platform that will run tests separately, and we will do certain things like, if I want to test prices, I can use VWO to change the prices all over our website, but the e-commerce platform isn't going to know that I've done that. So I have to have a parallel test running on the e-commerce platform and a test on our website, and connect the two together, and then collect the data off separately, and then run the same kind of either Bayesian analytics or something like that on it, or frequentist analysis to see, that basically to give me the kind of dashboards that VWO would normally give me, because if you look at just the one half of the test, you might not necessarily get the right things. And then usually we'll kind of run these tests for about a week. We always try to get at least a 7-day period, but actually we have this sort of 30-day business cycle where we will release a new version of the product, we get a traffic spike, and those people are the much more engaged people. They're the guys who update every month, and they're different users to the kind of people who come for the rest of the month. So if we run a test during one of the quieter periods or only over the spike, then we will get totally the wrong idea about what's happening.
Okay. And so let's say with these experiments, how do you split the audience? On what factors or parameters do you divide the audience, or do you divide the incoming audience and create the test?
We use geolocation quite a lot because we've noticed very big differences in behavior across different regions. The US obviously converts really, really well. Places like Brazil and Russia don't. They basically only get the free product. But then we also pay a lot of attention to how long someone has been our user or our customer. As I mentioned, we have a counter that counts how many times someone has been through our website and downloaded our product again and again. And we're trying a lot more with segmenting around that behavior, because we believe, and we have the biggest hypothesis running is that, and it's not too far-fetched, is that the people who've been using our product the longest and are our most sort of regular users are the ones that are more likely to convert. It's just a question of figuring out exactly who they are and giving them the right experience at the right time.
Absolutely. I've also noticed that you guys use device information as well in order to personalize at least the website experience. At least for example, for Mac versus Windows. I think that's one of the more key examples that I've seen.
Yeah, I mostly do that to avoid cross-contamination of Mac users and Android users. Obviously, being a business that sells a piece of desktop software, our mobile traffic isn't quite what a lot of people are used to seeing. I've seen anywhere from 8 to 25% mobile traffic on talked about in presentations and talks and stuff. We've got more like 1% of mobile traffic. So I don't even often bother excluding them very often, but I will exclude Mac traffic because our Mac experience is very different. And if you arrive on our website on a Mac and get put into a test, it might break the Mac experience for you. So yeah, we think a bit about what device people are coming to on our website. We also think a lot about screen resolution as well. One of the things we worked out was that our designers, everyone else uses a little PC, but our designers have these big, beautiful iMacs. and they were designing things for big, beautiful iMacs. And our customers have a 7-year-old Lenovo laptop with an 800 by 600 resolution. So we started segmenting a lot by resolution and figuring out, oh, okay, look, the guys who are using the grandma laptop are behaving totally different because they can't even see the buy buttons.
Absolutely, and that's one of the key things which I've seen has a lot of impact, because it really determines your entire user experience. Because with different resolutions, the experience totally differs from person to person, and that's one of the key things that really helps you separate your experiments versus your competitors' experiments. If you have a very personalized experience for a certain resolution, it really goes a long way in user experience. Absolutely love that point. So can you share a bit of examples, maybe one or two really good experiments that you ran, which you can really remember from the top of your head, and really we can learn a lot from?
Yeah, so one of the things that it's a little bit cliche, but pricing and discounting really made a big difference to us. Early on, the kind of the founders weren't keen on me fiddling with the prices or changing the prices. They thought they had it right. But we ran some exit surveys and we realized that one of the reasons that people weren't buying our product, and we were asking them when they left the cart without buying, like, well, what stopped you? And they just said the price. And I thought, well, that's an easy thing to fix. So we started doing some discounting on places where regular users would come through. I didn't want to discount for everybody and be like a kind of a mattress store in the UK. They have a stereotype for always doing a discount all the time. But we realized that on certain places where regular users come through, let's give those guys a discount because they're our loyal customers. And that made a massive impact right away. And it kind of gave me license to do whatever I wanted on the site, because the owners said, well, all right, fine, you're making money. It also just told me that the price point was wrong about the product, and that there was a bit of rethinking to do about how much customers were willing to part with to get this product. Another thing that was quite surprising is that we found that when you're showing discounting, if you say $5 off, it's usually much more effective than saying 20% off. And the theory we've got going is that people can visualize $5 in their wallet much more than they can visualize 20% in their wallet. But whether that's the real reason or not, we've had pretty consistent results in applying that. And I went through the site and changed all of the percentage, 20% off to $5, $10 off, or whatever, and that's lifted everything quite a bit.
Amazing. And have you seen any other kinds of experiments which yield big results? Because I think majority of the times, if you run 100 experiments, probably 20 of them will yield the maximum results, right? So let's say pricing is definitely one of the most crucial things to get right, and that's true for any business. But are there any other things where, because let's say, let me talk about a lot of our visitors may be running, let's say, B2B campaigns, right, where they may not have pricing on their website. So is there anything, any core takeaway that they can use from your experience?
Yeah, so we ran a test that I don't know, we were very skeptical of. I wasn't particularly proud of it, but we have a fairly common element on our site, which is a feature table, which compares, the bronze, silver, and gold packages. Everyone's pretty much got one of those. And I had been testing this thing to death since I started, and changing the language on it, changing the order of things, changing the styling of it. And it had a bunch of green ticks next to the things that it did have, and a bunch of red, and just a blank space next to the things that it didn't have. And someone said to me, well, why don't we put like a red cross there? And I was, instead of nothing for the free version. So say, like, it's very, very clear that the free version doesn't have these things. And that worked really, really well. And he said, well, maybe it's not the words on the page exactly, but they're just counting green ticks. And I said, that can't be right. And I said, but very cynically, we did another test where we just added another red cross to the free column and another green tick to the premium column. And that made a massive impact. And I realized that I'd been testing the copy on this page and no one was reading it. They were just looking at the number of good things that the pro version had and making that decision. And I said, well, 3, that's not very many good things extra, but 5, that's a lot of extra good things. So that kind of bumped my cynicism up a little bit, but it was definitely quite impactful, and it made a lot of difference for how we style those feature tables in the future, because now we put more things in it and it works better.
I really, really love that example, because it goes on to show how very small things can have such a big impact. And that also shows even the example which you mentioned of $5 versus 20%, that goes on to show how much role consumer psychology or consumer behavior plays in that entire CRO equation. And that's something that a lot of times we tend to miss out on, because the best of the things probably it's very difficult that the users will tell us, right? It's something that is ingrained in our consumer psychology, because at the end of the day we are all just humans trying to optimize experiences. So that's a really important insight that a lot of people can use. So thanks a lot for that. So apart from that, like you mentioned, experimentation, like you mentioned, has a lot of key benefits for the end users as well as for the business, right? How do you see it shaping the culture at Avast? Do people are more open to experimentation as an idea, and how has it shaped your experiences internally?
So experimentation has been a really big part of the culture at Avast long before they acquired us. And it's just kind of assumed that everything that we do goes through a process of experimentation and iteration before it sees the light of day, and that we regularly review old assets, old campaigns, old messages, and just go, and go through that cycle of experimentation again. So we don't really have that problem that you often hear organizations talk about, the hippo problem, the highest paid person dictating how things should look or what they should say. The CEO would come and say, we need to test that, not say we need to change it to do this. So it's definitely a really ingrained part of the
absolutely. And
business.
I think that is one thing which separates the best performing marketing teams versus the average or the mediocre marketing teams in general, because right now it's all about the speed of experimentation. How fast can you experiment? Let's not assume things, but let's test them out and let's figure out, okay, what's the end outcome from that test, so that we have a fair chance. Absolutely, love that point.
Yeah.
So apart from that, what are the different books, blogs, or podcasts do you read, or do you keep track of to stay abreast with what's happening in marketing, to figure out, okay, what new things can you experiment, and just to keep yourself ahead of everybody else?
So I was quite influenced early on in my career by a book called Webs of Influence by Natalina High. I saw her speak at a conference here in London. I have a little bit of a background in psychology. My wife is a sociologist as well. So when I read that book, a lot of the kind of basic knowledge I had in these areas connected, and lots of light bulbs went off. So I based a lot of the earlier things that we tried on that book. And then being in London, very fortunate that there's lots of tech events, lots of marketing events. We have things like Social Lab London and SEO Brighton, and some of the biggest events in the world happening here in London. So we do our best to go over to those. Don't get to go to as many as I used to, but a lot of my knowledge in my career was based on things that I went to some conference and heard someone say, you can try this. And then I did it and it worked, and somebody noticed. And that's how I sort of went from a really sort of junior digital marketer to running a digital marketing department, was kind of poaching ideas that I picked up at conferences and making them work.
Fantastic. And Chase, really love the conversation. How can our audience connect with you? Let's say if they want to get in touch with you, how can they connect with you?
The best thing is on LinkedIn. It's on linkedin.com/Chase Richards, just one word. I was the first one to get that one. And aside from that, I'm quite terrible at networking, so I don't really have professional social media accounts. LinkedIn is where to go.
Great. Thanks a lot, Chase, for spending time with us. I'm sure our audience got to learn a lot today from you.
Right. Thanks very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.